Welcome to TMI Today with Rita Bocuzzi and Jen Lee. In this podcast, there is no such thing as too much information. We are diving into all of the taboo topics, from money and careers to relationships and parenting, to whatever else we've been too afraid to discuss as women. Listen in and join the movement as we raise each other up in our everyday lives.
Welcome, everyone. I am so super excited to be here. I'm Rita Bocuzzi, also known as Mama Rita Money, and we have Jen Lee, financial stress relief attorney extraordinaire, I like to say, because she is not your typical attorney, and I just love her. You know how many people get to say that they love an attorney? I do, because she is so much fun and makes life so joyful. And then we put together TMI, today's motivational insights. You know, we like to have a play on words, too much information. We don't believe that you could ever have enough information when it comes to our life skills that we get to implement. And we get to bring amazing experts to you, like Robyn Ginney, who Jen is going to introduce shortly, so that this way we can all level up and flourish financially together and step into our greatness and into our power to be empowered. So Jen, please introduce Robyn.
Thanks, Rita. Robyn Ginney is a partner at Hart Ginney, and Robyn is a divorce attorney, but she's not your typical divorce attorney. Robyn is an expert at extracting people from bad situations and helping people figure out the next steps forward, especially when it comes to a partner who may be abusive and that kind of thing. Robyn is an expert fighter for those types of people. So if you identify with anything Robyn says today, please definitely reach out for resources, because it's a hard topic when we're talking about how do you know when to leave and how do you do that when it comes to your marriage. So thank you for being here, Robyn.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us just a little bit about yourself. I introed you, but tell us how you kind of got to be this fighter for people who are in difficult situations.
When I was in college, I was actually studying to be I wanted to profile criminals for the FBI. I wanted to be a forensic profiler. So that was sort of where I was headed. And I did a lot of volunteering at crisis centers, domestic violence shelters, rape crisis centers, that sort of thing. We worked a lot with the police to sort of be sort of psychological triage for anything that happened. I sort of did Thursday night to Tuesday morning. So if there was some sort of violent occurrence that needed somebody to come in and sort of like, okay, this is where we are, this is what we're doing, this is the next step, maybe we go to the hospital together, maybe I take you to the shelter, that sort of thing. So I did that for a number of years, and I thought I was going to go into psychology. And then I had a couple of instances where I thought, you know, I'd rather be on the putting people away side. I'd rather be on the law side than the trying to fix people who are broken side. So I ended up going to law school thinking that I didn't want to do two things, tax and family law. I was very insistent that I was going to come out and maybe be a DA, work some sort of in the criminal, maybe work for a nonprofit working with domestic violence, like that. And then in law school, my third year, I got an internship with just a fantastic family law attorney who I'm still in touch with in Morgan Hill, who taught me that really family law is sort of like the general practice of law. It's a little bit of tax. That's actually a lot of tax, which I actually like now. It's a lot of psychology. It's a lot of psychology. And it's, you know, some trial, it's criminal, it's property, it's personal injury. Everything gets drawn in this context of a divorce. So it just seemed like a really good fit for me. And I've been loving doing it. I've been doing it for 20 years now. I did special education also for a little while, for about 4 or 5 years. So I have some sort of insight into IEPs and how so often kids in abusive relationships need support at school. And that's one of the things that we'll see is that there's some sort of behavioral plan in place for the kids. There's some support being provided for the kids because they need that because they're not getting it at home. So that's one of the things for too.
So one of the questions I have, and as an audience member listening to this, and you kind of have that gut feeling, like, I think something's wrong.
Mm.
What are like the warning signs? Like, how does someone know when their marriage, when they should get out, that or they shouldn't be treated like this, I guess is kind of why I see people coming around to, is like, this isn't normal.
That's such an important question, because so often I talk to people as they come in, and the overriding question is, how did I get here?
Yeah.
Because I am a strong, independent, successful woman, or at least I was before I met this guy. And it's
Mhm.
not always a man. It's not always, the woman being abused and the man sort of being as the abuser. But a lot of the clients that I see happen to be women. We have actually a couple of men in this sort of a similar dynamic, but it's most domestic violence is insidious. It's so hard to recognize when it happens to them personally,
Mhm.
because it's so different from the dynamic that they're used to.
Yeah.
And so many people find themselves coming from really stable homes, really good, close families, and they meet this one person and get drawn into that world. And being drawn into that world typically means that there are some warning signs, like you say. One of
Mhm.
the biggest warning signs is isolation.
Okay.
It's, we don't want you to talk to your family. I don't like your friends. I think your mom is a bad influence. Your brother is a horrible person. It starts like that. It starts with, I don't think they're good for you, because I think they're undermining you and you should be treated better than that. So
Hmm.
it sort of plants the seed of doubt that, well, maybe I shouldn't, or maybe they aren't, or maybe he's right. So it's not that you're ever asked to no longer keep in contact with your friends or family. It's just sort of easier not to.
Okay.
And often any conversations that you have with friends or family are supervised. You know,
Mm.
so many of us will take a call and sort of go into the other room and like, I don't want to be rude, I'm just gonna like go over here. If you're in a relationship with somebody who's controlling, they're right there, right next to you. So there's no conversation about, we had this really awful fight, or I just don't think that this is right, or, and so often we need somebody to bounce our gut ideas off of, like, is it me? Did I do this? Or is it him? And that's the point of the isolation, is that they don't want you to have somebody to tell you, no, 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 that's not how this is.
Mhm.
So that happens a lot, and it's so hard to see, because all you see is the friend just distancing away. And I think everybody, when they get into relationships, sort of, that the
Right.
person they're in a relationship, that they focus on that becomes their priority. So it's not entirely unusual to see somebody drifting away when they get into a new relationship. So
Mhm.
it's hard to see that.
How about other warning signs besides the isolation? What else could someone be thinking in their head? Oh, this isn't right. This isn't normal.
So in a healthy relationship, you are able to say, this thing that you did bothered me. When you said this, it made me feel this way. And then you have a conversation about it. And usually it's sort of, I didn't mean to make you feel this way. Let me understand why you feel this way. Let's work together so that I don't hurt you again. But in these sorts of sort of insidious abuse, emotional abuse situations, it's always your fault. It's
Mm.
always your fault. So when you say, when you said this thing, it made me feel this way, instead of, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, you get, well, you don't have the right to feel that way
Mm.
because you made me feel this way. And that's the difficult paradigm to understand, is that that person is always the victim.
Okay.
And you are always the one victimizing them. And that never changes. They are always the center of everything. And it's always you who are being asked to make the changes to satisfy them, but it's like pouring all of your energy into a black hole because there's no bottom to it. There's no, suddenly they're like, okay, I feel stronger and I'm able to do this myself. It's a sort of an emotional vampire. They will suck all of your energy out.
Is that what the feeling is, or what I'm thinking of is when you say something to somebody and they immediately say, well, you made me do that. Like your behavior, because you said that I, hit you or something like that. You made me do
Right.
that. Is that blaming? Is that kind of what you see?
It kind of is. But that's a very obvious thing.
Right. That's, I was going very extreme with it, but
Yeah.
yes.
And physical abuse tends to be that way.
Okay.
Like you got me so angry by what you did that I had to hit
Okay.
you.
Okay.
But physical abuse is so much easier to draw the line and say, okay, that right there, when you hit me, I know that is wrong.
Okay.
I know that. But emotional abuse, there's no hit. There's no one thing that you can point to and say, oh, that right there, that was too long. Because it's the deflecting and the gaslighting. And everybody's heard that term gaslighting, but gaslighting is really the making you second guess what your position is and how you feel. Like, do I have the right to feel upset? Because they're obviously much more hurt than I am, but I thought I was the one that was wronged. So how is it that this is all about them again?
So it's like the rewriting of history. Like
it's the rewriting of history. Okay. Yes. And it's a history that is apparently yours, but you don't remember any of that history going that way at all. And people in these relationships often get this sort of Alice in Wonderland thing where they're having a discussion and they think that they're having a discussion about one thing and the person on the other side is completely in a different world. And all of the behavior that you have done that is fairly normal and rational, like, for example, talking to the barista at Starbucks, right? How many people go to Starbucks and they get a coffee and you sort of chat with the barista because you're there and you're human and, you're waiting for your drink and it's sort of like, how's your day? And, oh, that's a cute hat or whatever, you just, because we're human and we make chit chat. If you do that in a relationship with somebody who is abusive and emotionally abusive, you won't hear about it at that time, but at some point in the future, you will hear, well, you hit on the barista every time you see that barista. It doesn't matter if they're male or female, you're hitting on the barista. You can't be trusted. Every time we go out in public, you're hitting on somebody. You always do this. You need attention. You are, maybe you're hypersexualized, whatever it is. And then in your reality, you're thinking, I was just chatting. I don't even remember that barista. I was just chatting to somebody because I was friendly. And it's a totally different world. It's just a different world.
Yep.
Being the money gal, my question is, how does money come into play with money control, or how does that work on both sides, right? The person, the controller, or the person that is the victim in this type of scenario?
So we'll see. Generally, what happens is that the abusive one becomes the controller of everything. And that's easier in a marriage, not as easy when they're not married. But generally in a marriage, I'll see over time, because everything is very slow over time, so you don't really see that it's happening. It's just sort of a effect. It starts out with part of the isolation, especially in really abusive situations, is, well, you shouldn't be going to work. You don't need to work for whatever. I got this. And a lot of abusers are very high earners. They're high income. So it's possible that, the woman doesn't have to work. Maybe she stay home with the kids. Also not unusual. If you have the option to stay home and raise your kids, most women would rather do that. But also there's this underlying, if you have a job, then you're not isolated, because then you're talking to people at your job and I can't control that.
You can't supervise it.
Yes, exactly.
Got it.
So there's that sort of dynamic too. But when typically the woman becomes reliant on that income, then typically we'll see all of the accounts in his name. She has no idea what exists. He pays the mortgage, he pays the utilities, he pays for everything. So she's just sort of maintaining the household. Often we'll see a lot of she'll get like an ATM card or a credit card with really low limit, like $250. And this is what you do to buy groceries. And if you need more than $250 to buy the groceries, then you need to explain to me why you're being so unfrugal. Not why I should be giving you more because of inflation, but you need to be doing a better job because I'm working so hard to provide for the family and you're not doing your responsible part by trying to keep costs lower. So there's that sort of dynamic of if you need more, you're wrong. And it sort of overlooks this, you shouldn't be put in that position in the first place. And that's also the sort of red herring thing. We're going to focus over here on you not being frugal so that you never get to ask me why it is that you don't have access to all of the funds in the first place. We're going to focus entirely over here. Yeah.
Right. So I want to, we could talk about this for days and days and days. There's all kinds of stuff here. What can women or people do who are in this situation? What's their first step that they have to take to get to someone like you? What's that look like?
That looks like a leap of faith.
Okay.
It really is. Because the women that I see come in are in one of two positions. Either they're just starting this process and they're completely terrified, or they started the process a couple of years ago and it's just this never-ending thing and they don't know how to get done with it. And so I'll see both of those coming in. Initially, when I get a call from somebody who says that they think they might be in an abusive relationship, not really sure, but they do know that when they leave, they're going to be completely cut off financially, they're going to get kicked out of the house, and they're going to lose custody of the kids.
That sounds pretty abusive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's their dynamic, right? And they've been taught so long, this is you, this is your fault. You did this. You're responsible for this. You're not good enough. And the overriding sort of impression they have is they're going to mess this up too. You're going to hire the wrong attorney. You're going to leave me and nobody else is going to want you. I'm going to get the kids because you're mentally unstable. All of those emotional outbursts that you had when you thought that something was unfair, but you didn't know how to voice it, all of that's going to be held against you. So these women are convinced that they're going to lose everything. And that's that leap. That's that leap of faith of, but at least I'll be me again.
Yeah.
I'll get to figure out who I am. And I recognize that I may be facing all of these challenges.
So are there tips, like when you're going into a relationship, like the prevention part of it, like so that this way, because I can see that that's slippery slope sliding down, it can be very easy. Like what tips or what knowledge to young women or men entering into relationships, like are the signs that they should look for before they even get into maybe a relationship with somebody? That they might be able to see, like even from a dating perspective?
The hallmarks of domestic violence in general is that sort of cycle of abuse, right? It starts out sort of like the frog to the prince, to the frog to the prince. They start out very nice and everything is great. But the first thing you'll notice is this lack of boundaries. We've known each other for 2 weeks. Why don't you move in? That's one of the big red flags, is this lack of boundaries, of jumping in wholeheartedly immediately and wanting that sense of we're right next to each other. We are entwined in each other's lives after knowing each other for a month. That's the red flag. The second red flag in sort of way that these things progress is about a month or two into this sort of entwined relationship, typically the abuser is mentally unstable and has very significant issues with self-regulation, emotional regulation. So you'll get this weird explosion, just like as if it was a physical thing, but instead of hitting you, they have this complete emotional breakdown about any little thing. You left a cup on the counter, you wore the wrong shirt, you talked to the barista, you didn't text them back in time, whatever it is that any other person that you were in a relationship with previously would never have been a thing. All of a sudden, this little thing is a life-ending, life-altering, complete emotional breakdown. And that's what's so insidious about it, is that if you're coming from a place where you've never dealt with somebody like that, it's terrifying.
Mhm.
Because here you have this person that you're in this relationship with, and it's usually very intense. They're having a complete meltdown, and it's apparently your fault, and you had no idea that you were such a horrible person. And that's that first red flag, that if you get this sort of inconsolable emotional breakdown this early in the relationship that seems like it's not rational, it's not rational. That's the second red flag.
Yeah, so you get to trust yourself.
Trust yourself.
As far as resources reaching out, when would they be reaching out to you? And how, like you said, it's a leap of faith, but that reach out, that ask, that's a big, but so where do they go, or what can they do? What's the next best move when they even just to have a conversation, maybe?
Yeah. The first conversation that I recommend is with their best friend, whoever that is, because often the best friend has seen all of this unfolding and is dying to say something, but they've never been asked, and they don't want to say because they see what's going on, and they know that if they say anything, it's going to just maybe drive you farther away. So that's the first person that I recommend reaching out to. The second person that I recommend reaching out to is maybe a therapist, but not a couples therapist.
I was just going to say, talk a little bit about not going to therapy with your abuser.
So that happens. So often what happens when you're going to therapy with your abuser is well, there's a couple of things that I see a lot. One is that the abuser picks the therapist. And often this picking process is a one-on-one conversation with the therapist to prime the therapist with, my spouse has these problems and these issues that we're working through with her, and she is hyper reactive to everything. So I need you to help me work with her, immediately identifying her as the one who needs the help. And, therapists, one of the problems with working with therapists is that they are in your world with you.
Right.
If nobody shows them that this world is not like any other world, they don't know that. Right. So if the abuser can get the therapist into their world, then when they bring the abused into that world, it's a different paradigm, because now the therapist is thinking, okay, this is the person who's been identified as the one who needs help in this relationship, not the one who brought me in. And oftentimes, what we also see in that relationship once you get to therapy is the abused doesn't want to say anything, because there's not only this understanding that she is the one that has the problem that needs to be worked on, but she also knows that if she says anything different, like, actually, that's not what happened, or, well, actually, he did this, or actually, that once they leave therapy, she's going to get completely broken down in the parking lot, on the ride home, later that night. It's going to be a never-ending gaslighting process for the next day or two to walk back everything that she said to the therapist. So the next time you go to therapy, nobody's going to say anything, because she doesn't want to do that again. So she's just going to sit there and make comments about, like, oh, it's a really lovely day, or try to deflect on anything. And then what happens is that the abuser just ends up dominating the entire conversation. And then that just gives them more fodder to be like, see, she's not even cooperating in this. She's completely checked out. So it is her, and I'm the victim. So that's what I see a lot happening.
So individual therapy.
Yeah.
Get
Yes.
a voice.
Super
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah,
Definitely.
individual therapy, co-parenting therapy is also really horrendously difficult with somebody who is intent on completely undermining you.
Mhm.
And I see that a lot. That's a common order that the court will make when you're involved in a custody dispute. 80% of the time, you can go to a co-parenting therapist and they will help you sort of with your communication between the two of you, because it's just a different communication style and it works for most people. But if you're in an abusive relationship, what that turns into is yet another opportunity for the abuser to paint themselves as the victim and turn that therapist against you. And that's what happens so often.
Wow. Whew, heavy subject. but
Lots. Yeah.
So, so important. Yes, we could talk about this forever, but I'm so excited that you know, bringing these things to light. They're not always easy, but they're necessary. And somebody out there that hears this, that just changes their lives. Like that tip of the knowing to be individual, because you are two individuals in a relationship. You're never one whole, you know, you're never going to be one whole person. You're two people in one relationship. To do the therapy separately, I think is so super powerful. So Jen.
So Robyn, we have to wrap up. I know we could go on for days and there's so many things we could still cover, but I have to ask you, Robyn, so what's one fun fact about yourself? What do you want your audience to know?
I'm a car nerd.
A
I
car
like
nerd.
cars. I like
nice.
old cars. I had in high school and college a red 68 Camaro that was the love of my life. You know, I think of that fondly, like, you know, my childhood pet. One 68 Camaro was like the best dog ever, but you know,
But it's a Camaro.
Much better.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Nice.
really cool. I always knew that we had that in common because I like cars too. But yeah. Well, thank you, Robyn, so much for being here. Thank you for being on TMI and bringing a heavy subject to light so that people can really help themselves, basically, and use that information they find. So thanks, Robyn.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.